Tour of Tahiti is the 8th normal rally event we are doing. And as you might have guessed, well, like I did of course with the Land Rover, I figured it was worth it for me to stick with the SUV I'll be using for at least the next 2 rally events, because while the bottom 2, I'll be saving those for the Toyota RSC. As for the Tsukuba Wet Race, well, that's yet to be determined. So I've topped up my water now, and I am ready to get through another 15 minutes of driving at least. And we are starting off the normal tour of Tahiti by going against the Evo 6. And because this is the Tommy Mäkinen edition Evo 6, you know I'm not changing anything. So let's get going. And where if we win, we will get 54 points. I've also driven 12 miles in this thing. And well, because this is an SUV, as I would have expected, a pretty immediate launch off the line. Because, well, typically with SUVs, there is usually more grip, and therefore acceleration. Even though that partly comes, of course, from me having the carbon drive shaft as well as also having a racing flywheel. Which is probably the main reason why I make the launch itself look piss easy. I gotta say, it's also because the SUV is 4-wheel drive, so that's another reason why my Infinity gets off the line so well. But either way, I think we should be okay here. Because I did okay against the Escort last time, without any real dramas. I'm convinced in saying this will more or less be the same. So in other words, I believe the Infinity will be just fine on the roads of Tahiti Maze. The way I see it. Even then, of course, that these roads will most likely never exist in real life. Although it would be cool if they did. Even though they would need to be somewhere in the Tahiti Islands if they were going to exist in real life. I'm also pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, Tahiti itself is technically in the islands of, I think it's Papua New Guinea, where Tahiti is located. Someone may correct me in the comments, but last time I checked with my research, I think it said something about Tahiti Maze being in Papua New Guinea, or at least with the Tahiti Islands in general. I think they're in Papua New Guinea, if I'm not mistaken, but that's just a guess. Although this does come from someone who never really was that good at geography anyway, but either way, I think it's fair to say we are going to be just fine here at Tahiti Maze. Because when I faced against the Evo 4 at Swiss Alps, I pretty much put on a clinic performance to show just how fast my Infinity really was. And I think it's fair to say that's more or less the same case here as well. Even though I will admit the Evo 6 is doing a better job of keeping up with me than what the Evo 4 was doing. And maybe that's because it's just a later model with more horsepower, but either way, I will give him credit for keeping up with me. Even though this race in particular has been basically a salient performance by me. It's also kind of sad to say that they didn't bring back Tahiti Maze after this game. Even though they did technically bring it back in the PSP version of Gran Turismo, which came out in, I think it was 2009 when the PSP version of Gran Turismo came out. Mainly it was just every course and almost every car with a few notable additions in that game that were just added. Mainly with Gran Turismo PSP, I think it was mainly just all the cars that existed in the GT series up to that point, or most of them anyway. And then basically, oh yeah, and also all the courses. But they also had a few notable additions as well in terms of the car list. Even though this does come from someone who's only really played Gran Turismo on the PSP at least only, once or twice, and has never actually played through the game personally. I did think about it a few times, but since I don't really have the time to install a PSP emulator, considering the other things I have to think about at this time. And since I know that buying a PSP will not really have much of a different experience from playing on a PSP emulator, it's probably going to be a long time before I eventually do manage to get a PSP and therefore play through Gran Turismo PSP. Even though I have played the game probably once, maybe twice. Even though it was technically at a friend's house, and it was also at a time where I was younger. But, I don't know. Maybe I will do a playthrough of Gran Turismo PSP at some point, but it will probably just be with the licenses and not really with anything else. Since that's the, and right at the end I have to get given a penalty. Fortunately, however, I did have a big enough gap to at least be aware of that. And where is the... Okay, he's behind me. So, a pretty dominant win in the end, if I do say so myself, and it probably would have been even more so had I not been given that penalty right at the end. It's fair to say this would have been at least a 4-second win in the end. But I will give the Evo 6 credit for keeping up with me, even though that was basically a dominant performance from start to finish. The race itself realistically was not really close. It was basically just me going out and quite simply... Actually no, I won't save this replay, I'll save the next one. And what do you know, we're up against the Evo 6 again. Well, at least it keeps it interesting. And we actually get more points than what we have been getting at this point. Okay, here we go. And once again, with my carbon drive shaft and also my racing flywheel, I immediately take off on the launch, as I would have expected. And that's a wall. Hopefully I will not hit that wall again, because I know that with some of these rally courses, it's very hard to recover from your mistakes if you fall behind early. And you get penalised. But at this time at least, I'd say we're doing okay. As the gap is 1¼ seconds to the Evo 6. And I'm doing a lot of running wide at the moment, so I need to figure out a way to stop doing that and just focus on actually keeping the car away from the walls, because if I don't, then I could get a string of penalties. And that's a wall. And, oh, fuck my ass. I have no idea how I did not get penalised for that. But either way, I was not happy with the way that corner entry looked. But either way, I am here and I am continuing to show my salient domination over the Evo 6. Even though I will give him points for keeping up with me, and now the first penalty of the race occurs. Well, that had to happen sooner or later. It was just simply a matter of when it was going to happen. And I'm getting a push from behind, but I think I should be okay. Probably don't need to go through those sharp hairpin turns in first gear. But either way, I'll definitely give the Evo 6 credit for keeping up with me so far. Because it is fair to say that he's not letting me waltz away with this, as much as I am really trying to. And yeah, sure, mistakes have been involved, obviously. It's kind of a natural thing to say that mistakes would be involved somewhat. But either way, I'll definitely give the Evo 6 credit for at least keeping up with me. As in staying within pretty much, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 seconds of where I'm positioned at this time. Even though the gap probably will increase. And providing this time I do not get a penalty right before the end of the race like I did before, this will more or less be another dominant... This will more or less be another dominant win, in my opinion. Because it is fair to say that the races I've ran with the Infinity, they've not really been that close. There have been battles at times, but there's not really been anything noteworthy to say that my Infinity has proven to be beatable at this stage. So I think it's fair to say that having a lighter car in some cases also proves to be a faster car. As I am now 4 seconds up the road. As I am now 4 seconds up the road from the Evo 6. So we are doing good right now. And at the end of lap 2, I will set a 226.4 and be precisely nearly 5 seconds up the road from the Evo 6. That's about where I expected myself to be. Have I now passed the 500 mile mark? I think I probably have. If I'm not mistaken. But anyway. We continue our progression by slowly but surely slipping away from the Evo 6. And I think it's fair to say this is probably where I will most likely not be using the Infinity again because, well, the domination has been pretty clear-cut, and while the races I've done with this thing, they've not really been that close, unfortunately, compared to other races I've done recently. But then again, you do have to expect these things, and sometimes your choices tend to be more dominant than the others. But then again, I wouldn't normally consider using an Infinity unless I really wanted to. But I think it's fair to say it definitely goes out under the circumstances as being just one of those things that quite easily shows how much of a slow ride it really is to just have a car that's able to cope with the changeable conditions so well. Although I didn't think rubber banding was quite as strong here as it is at Grand Canyon, or in the Swiss Alps for that matter. But anyway, another sweep of wins for the Infinity FX45, and 7.4 seconds over the Evo 6. That's about where I expected to be. So it doesn't really faze me that much. Anyway, let's go check out... let's go save our replay, as I once again chose to save on the reverse course. But, whatever. Another rally event is done, and of course, another dominant performance is very much cemented. So what are we going to win this time? We get the Ford Escort. I kind of figured sooner or later we would no doubt get the Escort Kazi, and I think it's fair to say that this car has definitely shown that to me here. I always knew we were going to wind up getting the Escort at some point. I was just waiting for it to see how long it was. Anyway, there we go. Tour of Tahiti is now done. And next up is the Tsukuba Wet Race. And then we have the 2 Cathedral Rocks events. So, another easy win and another 0.4% of progress following the Tour of Tahiti. Now let's find our Escort. Here it is. The Ford Escort Rally Car. as driven by, I think, Juha Kankkunen was the driver of this car, even though his name is obviously not shown, but either way. I really do love this intricate attention to detail with the overall paint scheme. I really do. And also because, well, I just really love this car in general because, well, obviously, it's the Ford Escort Cosy, and I like it. In other words, the Ford Escort that's been tricked out by Ford's UK powerhouse, Cosworth. Anyway. So, next up, we have the Tsukuba Wet Race. That is what we are doing next.